In another authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the Dajjal will come for 40 days. The first day of which is like 1 year, and the second is like 1 month, and the third is like 1 week, and the rest will be like normal days of the year. And this fits in perfectly with other narrations that show that the Mahdi shall rule for 7 years. Let us now calculate the time frame of the Dajjal. Dajjal will stay for 1 year, plus 30 days, which is 1 month, plus 7 days, which is 1 week, plus 37 days, which is the remaining of the 40 days that the Prophet ﷺ said. That is 1 year and 74 days exactly, or 1 year and 2 months and 2 weeks. And this is just a small fraction of the 7 years that the Mahdi shall rule. So in the last portion of this time, or Allahu A'lam exactly when, we cannot say for certain exactly when, but sometime within the portion of these 7 years, for 1 year and 2 months and 2 weeks, the Dajjal will come and he shall wreak his havoc and terror in all of the world. In another hadith in Sahih Muslim, Jabir ibn Abdullah reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, "There shall always be a group from my ummah that shall fight upon the truth," meaning they shall always be defending the truth. ظاهرين, they shall always be apparent and clear until the day of judgment, until Isa ibn Maryam comes down. And their Amir will say to him, so notice this is another reference to the Mahdi. Their Amir. Who is the Amir of the Muslims when Isa comes down? The Mahdi. And this hadith is in Muslim as well. Yet another reference to the Mahdi in the authentic books of Bukhari and Muslim. Their Amir will say to him, "Come, lead us in prayer." Isa will respond, "No. You are leaders over one another. بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ أُمَرَاء." Showing the respect of Allah to this ummah. This is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ said. Showing the respect that Allah has given to this ummah. So Isa ibn Maryam will come down and he will not be the imam of this prayer. In another hadith, the Mahdi will say to Isa ibn Maryam, "Come lead us in prayer." Isa ibn Maryam will say, "No, it has been called for you and you should lead it." So Isa ibn Maryam will pray behind the Mahdi. Isa ibn Maryam will pray behind the Mahdi, and this is something which is clearly reported in Bukhari and Muslim, even though the Mahdi is not mentioned by name. However, there is no question that these ahadith apply to him, and that is why this is the opinion of all of the commentators of hadith, such as Ibn Hajar, Ibn Kathir, Suyuti, Muhammad Anwar Shah al-Kashmiri, Siddiq Hassan Khan, and all the scholars who ever commented on these hadith. They all mention that the reference here is to the Mahdi. And in fact, in one version of this hadith, the same hadith of Jabir reported in Sahih Muslim, in another version reported in the Musnad of Al-Harith, which is another book of hadith, there is the additional phrase, فَيَقُولُ أَمِيرُهُمُ الْمَهْدِي. Their leader, the Mahdi, will say. And this is an authentic hadith, and it is the exact same hadith, except that it is not reported in Sahih Muslim. Realize that one of the jobs of the muhaddith, of the scholar of hadith, is to compile all of the various narrations of a hadith to see what different wordings exist. And so one of the benefits of compiling all of the hadith, perhaps you find a certain wording in one version of the hadith which is not mentioned in another, and therefore when we compile the narrations of this same hadith, in Sahih Muslim the wording is, "Their Amir will say." In another authentic hadith, with the same hadith, another version of it, in the Musnad of Al-Harith, it says, "Their Amir, the Mahdi, will say." Now here, a person will ask a question. How is it possible that Isa ibn Maryam will be led in prayer by the Mahdi, even though Isa is a Nabi and a Rasul, and the Mahdi is merely a follower of the Prophet ﷺ? I mean, if you like, an average Muslim in the sense that he is not a prophet or a Rasul, he's not even a Sahabi. He is just a follower of the Ummah, a member of the Ummah of the Prophet ﷺ. There is no doubt that Isa is more noble and blessed than the Mahdi, and he is the one who will come and kill Dajjal. So how can he then pray behind the Mahdi? The answer to this, first and foremost, the wisdom is given by the Prophet ﷺ himself. This is an honor that Allah is blessing us with, the best and greatest Ummah, for we have the greatest Prophet and the most blessed book and the most perfect Sharia. Therefore, as a manifestation of that honor, one of the followers of the Prophet ﷺ shall lead another Prophet in prayer. Likewise, secondly, Ibn Hajar, Ibn al-Jawzi, and others, they mention another wisdom, and that is that Isa ﷺ will allow the Mahdi to lead him in order to prove that he is now coming not as a prophet, but rather as a follower of a prophet. Therefore, he is allowing himself to be led by a leader of the Muslims to imply and to clearly state that his second coming is as a follower to the Prophet ﷺ and not as an independent prophet. And so when he prays behind the Mahdi, this will remove doubts about this fact. Likewise, the third point you can say, it is completely permissible for a person to be led in prayer by someone who is better than him. In fact, even our beloved Prophet ﷺ was led in prayer by other people. Of course, this is the exception rather than the rule, and thus in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, this only occurred, as far as we know, 2 times. Only twice was the Prophet ﷺ led in prayer by Sahabi. And in each of these times, the Sahaba started the prayer while the Prophet ﷺ was not there. Once Abdurrahman ibn Auf started the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ had not returned from an expedition he was on. And when he came back, Abdurrahman ibn Auf had already finished 1 rak'ah. So the Prophet ﷺ joined the Muslims at the back of the lines, and he completed the 2nd rak'ah. When the Prophet ﷺ finished praying and the Muslims saw that the Prophet ﷺ was praying, they became worried and scared because they had led him in the prayer. Abdurrahman had led him in the prayer. When he finished praying, he said, "You have acted correctly, you have done good," because they prayed on time. And also before he passed away, the Prophet ﷺ prayed behind Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So there's no problem where somebody prays behind someone who is better than him. And a fourth point, quite a few scholars, and this is an interesting point, they have claimed that Isa ibn Maryam shall indeed allow the Mahdi to lead him in this particular prayer, the Fajr of the morning that he descends. But after this, they claim, he shall lead the Muslims, including the Mahdi, in other prayers. And there are some narrations that hint at this. For example, in another version of this hadith, quoted in Sahih Muslim as well, the Prophet ﷺ said, "How will you be when the son of Mary comes down?" And instead of saying فَإِمَامُكُم مِّنْكُم, in this narration it says فَأَمَّكُم, and he shall lead you. So there are 2 versions of the hadith. The first version says فَإِمَامُكُم مِّنْكُم, your imam shall be amongst you. And the second one says فَأَمَّكُم, he shall be your imam. Now, this wording of أَمَّكُم, he shall be your imam, is only reported in 1 version of Muslim. The other versions, all of them, Bukhari and Muslim, and all the other versions in Muslim, they say فَإِمَامُكُم مِّنْكُم, your imam will be amongst you. So some scholars have claimed that the wording فَأَمَّكُم is not as preserved or as authentic as the wording فَإِمَامُكُم مِّنْكُم, your imam shall be amongst you. And while, yes, I would agree that if we had to choose between the 2 wordings, the first wording, which is muttafaq alayh, which is imamukum minkum, this is no doubt more authentic. Still, if we understand this to mean that Isa will eventually become our imam, then there is no contradiction in accepting both versions of the hadith, and Allah knows best. So, Isa ibn Maryam will come down, imamukum minkum, your imam will be amongst you, he shall pray behind this imam. And then فَأَمَّكُم, afterwards he shall lead and not the Mahdi. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And before we move on, it is interesting side point to note that Isa ibn Maryam is both a prophet and a companion, a Rasul and a Sahabi at the same time. And this is the only person this applies to. Because the definition of a Sahabi is someone who met the Prophet ﷺ in a state of wakefulness while this man believed in the Prophet ﷺ, believed in his messagehood. And this condition applies to Isa ibn Maryam. When did he meet the Prophet ﷺ? During the journey of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. And we know that Isa ibn Maryam is still alive. The other prophets that met the Prophet ﷺ, they met him with their souls. As for Isa ibn Maryam, he met him with his body and soul, and therefore he shall be the last of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ to die during the last days left of this earth, preceding the blowing of the trumpet by a short period of time. This ummah of the Prophet ﷺ started with the best of the companions, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhum, and others, and it shall be concluded with the best of the companions ever, Isa ibn Maryam, the Prophet and the Rasul, and the Kalimatullahi alqaha ila Maryam. This is one of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to this ummah.